My name is Don Sorrell, and this video will be on weed control in hay and pasture fields. Weeds reduce the quality of our hay and pastures, as well as reduce the stand life of existing and more desirable forages such as our fescues, orchard grass, and clovers and alfalfas. Weeds compete for space, water, and nutrients, and they reduce the yield potential of our fields and reduce the performance of animals either grazing or consuming hay from these weed-infested fields. Weed pressure is caused mainly by low pH or fertility in the soil. Can be caused by the thinning of desirable forages, such as when red clover is reduced from fields. It opens up the fields for weeds to come in. Weed control strategies begins with, first of all, evaluating the hay and pasture fields and identifying the weeds that are there and the percent of weed pressure you may have in individual fields. I like to evaluate these fields at least twice a year, preferably in the spring of the year, looking for winter annuals, as well as during midsummer, looking for warm season annual and perennial weeds that might be present. Also prefer testing the soil before any major weed control strategies are done. Getting an idea what the soil pH is and the fertility needs are before we make any additional plantings in these fields. We can come back in after we've addressed the fertility needs, and we can, in fields with reduced weed pressure, we can simply come back in and renovate these fields with legumes and grasses. Another strategy for weed control, especially in pastures, is timely mowing. We often see fields that are mowed very late in the year after weeds have flowered and went to seed. Improved grazing in the form of rotational grazing, for example, can also help manage weeds by having animals graze more closely in the rotation system that will enable animals to graze the weeds while they're young and tender and more vegetative in nature. Herbicides is an option, sometimes the last option we want to consider, but in the case of heavily infested fields with weeds, it may be necessary to control those weeds with a herbicide, then come back and reestablish desirable forages. The video and photographs that follow is from a 9-acre hay field owned by Jeff Trout. We first evaluated this field and determined that the weed pressure was quite large, that the desirable forages in there, mostly grasses, were about 50% of a stand. We followed up with a soil test and found out that soil pH was about 5.5 or less in some cases. And we also found that fertility was a little bit low in phosphorus and potassium. So our plan was twofold here in the spring, was to increase fertility by adding fertilizer as needed, and more importantly was to get a spring application of herbicides. Based on the weeds that were present, we selected crossbow as our herbicide selection at the rate between 2.5 to 3 quarts per acre. And we used the Southern States sprayer, which is a boomless sprayer, and that sprayer will spray approximately 40 feet in width. We will follow up after first cutting the hay with a lime application, and then reevaluate this field early fall to see if we can come back in and renovate some grasses in this field. And then in the spring of 2021, plans are to renovate some red clover into this field. So it'll take at least a year for us to transition this field from a fairly poor to just an average hay field into something that's more productive and profitable for Mr. Trout. We also have some excellent publications on weed control. There's one particular publication, Weed Management in Hay and Pasture Fields. You can go online, Google UK forages, and select weed management is the topic, and you can pull that publication up, or you can call your extension office and we'll be glad to send a copy to you.